Yeah, so I had a similar journey, right? So I was raised in the Midwest, and they're just...
Me too.
Yeah, but you were raised in Detroit, right? Mm-hmm. And I was raised not that far outside of Detroit. It takes about an hour. But the racial demographics are different, right? It's like super Polish. And so I didn't know that I didn't know how to talk about race until I showed up in a classroom in South Atlanta at 22. And my students all were black. And I was literally the only one in the room who was uncomfortable talking about race. And I don't know if you know this, but I teach English literature, and turns out like that's in there a lot. No idea. I had no idea. I don't know why. Now I'm looking at it like, how did I not know that? But I didn't. And one of my colleagues handed me a book. I love her. Her name's Deanna. She said, I think you need this. Or she said, I think you would like this book. And she handed me a copy of Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Which if you're sitting here thinking like, I don't know how to talk about race, I recognize myself in these stories that they're telling, especially for white people, start there. Start there. She breaks it down. It's incredible, the way that she breaks it down. Start there. Why are all the black kids...
Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by Beverly Tatum?
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, I read it in a weekend, and I was like, my whole life makes sense. Like, my surroundings I could not figure out how to put them into perspective, right? And then I did. I figured it was like, this is it. These are the words that we can use. So we know how it happens. So why is it important to you?
Initially, raising an advocate, or my thought process behind it before it had a name, was that I wanted to raise a feminist because I had a boy. And so for me, it was, I want to teach my son how to advocate for women, how to make sure that he's not letting his male friends be jerks at school. So telling them when something they're saying is sexist. That was kind of the initial process before I wrote that post, before any of that. It was this, if my husband were here, he would say that I went a little crazy when I found out I was having a boy. I was like, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, I don't know, like, what am I supposed to do with that? And he's like, well, you have brothers. I'm like, yeah, but they were really young. Like, they're the youngest. I don't know what to do with a boy. So I went on this tirade about no one buying him anything sports related or car related. Like, I was kind of, everything is gender neutral in this house for the first 6 months. And then he saw a ball in the store and was like, I want that. I'm like just pointing at the ball in Target. And I was like, so it begins, and I give you what you want. But also beyond that, like, how was I gonna raise this kid to be an activist? But then 2 years ago, Mike Brown happened, and for me, that was a wake-up call I call that my respectable Negro awakening, so to speak, where I thought that because I was working on a PhD and my husband was a teacher and we were like working hard to make sure our son grew up in a middle-class area, he was going to go to really good schools, this was not going to be a factor for him. And I shouldn't say it was Mike Brown, I should say it was Trayvon Martin, because Braxton was born a few months after he died. And when Black Lives Matter really got started, I was holding a baby watching this stuff. So for me, that was like, so what am I gonna do? Like, am I gonna sit here and cry about it? And I remember telling my husband, like, I don't get this. Like, these are good kids. Like, they're going to college. This isn't supposed to happen to them. This is supposed to happen where I grew up. This is supposed to happen, in the hood. This isn't the hood. Like, what's going on? And he looked at me and he said, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they were a good kid. What matters was they didn't deserve to die, period. And he was like, you have to stop thinking that even for me, that some black kids that's just what's gonna happen to them, and thinking from a larger thing. And I was like, okay, so that means that that could happen to Braxton. Like, there's literally nothing I can do now. So I'm doing all the things they tell me to do, and that's not going to matter. And he looked at me and he was like, that's not going to matter. We can't protect him from that. And I decided that I'm not going to be okay with that. I'm not, I'm just going to have to get uncomfortable. This, for me, is uncomfortable. I'm going to have to put myself out there because I have to save my son. I have to save his cousins. And
Yep. Yeah. So you were like, okay, this is it. We have to have this conversation. Why? I'm hearing in your story this idea that you really were like, I'm going to protect my kid from this, right? I'm going to protect my kid from this. So one of the choices that my family has made is that our daughters they're white and they are in a predominantly black school. And that, I really was like, okay, it's going to be fine, whatever. But the protection piece, so I have had to have conversations that, y'all, I'm not ready to have with a 4-year-old, because I don't understand them yet, right? I'm like, she's like, what is whiteness? And I'm like, oh, I'm reading Ta-Nehisi Coates right now. Like, can I get back to you? Because these are big words that I'm struggling with, so how do I tell my 4-year-old this, So talk to me a little bit about protection. So you said, like, you initially thought, this is what we're going to do. We're middle class, we're educated, we're going to push education, and that's going to protect our child from racism. And then you were like, oh, that's not real.
Yeah, because that's what I was told. I was told that if I stay focused in school, even though I grew up in a working class area, some of them weren't always nice. Sometimes, I grew up in areas where sometimes there were drug dealers in my area, but they knew me and they were kind of my protection. Some of my friends would think, oh, that's scary, but for me it was like, they know who I am, they're not going to let anything happen to me. But they also would tell me, these people in the hood would say, Danielle, are you studying? Are you, how did your test go? Show me your report card and we'll give you such and such for that. And I was supposed to leave. So it's like, we want you out of here, you're gonna do good. And that was supposed to save me. And then I'm like 30 years old realizing that is not gonna save me. That's not gonna save my kid either.